Hi, and welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. Welcome back.
Today we are going to talk about the gassy infant, which is something that a lot of parents struggle with around maybe beginning at the 2-week period of time, peaking at the 1-month time of life. And it's a common complaint that I get in the office when I see parents at the 2-week and the 1-month visits.
Yes, so common. So many questions about this. So let's dive in.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
So typically what I've seen is around that newborn period where you have this brand new baby at home. It's a learning curve, especially for first-time parents, with how to feed, when to change the diaper, what is the sleep schedule. There's a lot of initial flux and change as you're getting used to your new baby. And usually like at around 2 weeks or so, closer to a month, those issues have kind of settled down. Parents feel much more comfortable that they're able to feed their baby. But usually at that time, a new problem emerges, and that's the gassy, grunty infant. So just when you thought you had it down,
Yes.
in comes this other disruptor. And that is what I would like to discuss today, that gassy, grunty period of time.
Okay, so do you have memories of that period of time with your kids?
I remember during that period of time as a mom, my memory of this, sometimes it's related to gas and passing gas, but oftentimes timed with stooling.
Mhm.
And I remember having an entire day go by where there wasn't a good poopy diaper and entering that evening kind of knowing that, oh, if you just have a good poop, we're all going to have a good night. But
Right.
if you don't,
There's
it's
a
going
lot
to be
riding on this.
another grunty, groany night. And there's a little bit of apprehension as parents enter what they think is going to be a bad night. And I
Right.
do remember feelings of that, during this phase in my children's, newborn period. Did you
Mhm.
did you have any feelings like this with your kids?
Okay, so of my 4 that I had as newborns, honestly, with 3 of them, I do not remember this phase. Of course, they grunted with stooling and had some gassiness. However, I did have one with colic, and it was
Mm,
very difficult. And I feel like because of him, I knew and experimented with all of the tricks, right? So all of the things that you can do for that gassy, grunty, maybe slightly constipated or not stooling really well infant. Well, I
mhm.
tried all of them on him. Colic is
Right,
kind of a different beast, but it does give me parental experience in
right.
a lot of these techniques.
Yeah. So in the pediatric literature, there is an overarching theory that this is kind of like a gassy phase for infants, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes the grunting and groaning results in some release of gas. So a lot of the prevailing theories focus around reducing the production of gas, helping
Yeah.
eliminate gas. And for my advice in the office, this is a phase. It's
Mhm.
something that children go through in a particular period of their infancy, and then it resolves and they outgrow it, often without any type of intervention whatsoever.
Yes, yeah. I think this is an example of where we have the luxury, because of our profession, to feel very comfortable and confident. I don't need to do anything about this. This is a necessary phase. This is going to resolve. And I think that's a very challenging thing for parents, particularly first time parents, because your infant is crying. How do you possibly know why? And if or
Right.
not, you should be worried, right?
Right. I feel like it's very stressful. I mean, even though we're describing it as a finite normal period of infancy, it doesn't undersell how stressful it can be for parents, right?
Yeah. And
Like
particularly because it always represents a change.
Right.
This was not happening in the first week of life or the first 2 weeks. And now all of a sudden, like you said, we have this new issue to deal with. What does this even mean? Yeah.
Right. So, as we discussed, this gassy period of time during infancy is a finite self resolving time. And my advice that I give in the office is to paint a picture of understanding as to what's going on with their baby
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
order for them to feel reassured that, they're not doing anything wrong.
Hmm.
And even though the prevailing theory is that a lot of this discomfort is related to gas, I will often draw an even further analogy for parents to visualize related to stooling. I just want to be clear that the speech that I give to patients in the office is more of a way to help them set their parental mindset and expectations moving forward. I don't know if there's a way to prove this with evidence based medicine to give people a little bit of background, but I still feel like this speech is useful.
Although it could actually be true.
It could be. I describe the infant. Does your baby spend some time, really grunting, groaning, sometimes crying from pain, working at it for a good 5 to 10 minutes? The parents open up the diaper, and there's no poop, no results. Like,
Mhm,
what
mhm.
was all of that effort for? And
Yeah.
then at another time when they're just relaxing, holding their baby, nothing special, without a single grunt or groan, all of the stool comes out at that time. So,
Yes.
yes, and there's often an extreme understanding of that. Like, yes, we see that all the time. And I try to get the parents to see that there's a mismatch. The coordination of effort and result is mismatched at this time in the baby's life. And to help them understand this even more, I draw this analogy where I talk about when the newborn is first born.
Yeah.
While you're feeding them, it's like their GI tract is an open tube, where as you're feeding them, it's flushing right through their body and they're actively pooping, right?
Yes, they're
Just
pooping all the time.
yes,
Yeah.
straight through them, especially while feeding. Like, you're pouring it in and it's pouring right out.
Yes.
And in this mindset, I try to describe at around a month, you stop having the every 30-minute diaper change. They
Mhm.
begin to hold a little bit of stool in their rectal vault. And that process of holding a little bit of stool is how people become continent. So in that process, there's an adjustment phase where the
Yeah.
baby might have a sensation that there's something down there. They're groaning and feeling that sensation, but the release of the stool is not coordinated yet. And, this often is a good mindset for parents. They're like, oh, I get it. I see why, this is a temporary thing. And it can be a reassuring mental model for parents. Then I kind of move a step further where I talk about how you can support your child when they're feeling upset, when they're crying and upset. But if you help them poop too much now, then they don't learn to do the coordinated poop on their own. They become kind of
Yes.
more reliant on your assistance rather than having them struggle a little bit and learning to do it all on their own.
Yes, yes. It's almost like this is a necessary phase of their development that they just have to work through, right?
Exactly. And it helps, I think, set the parental responsibility
Mhm.
instead of feeling like my responsibility is to always ease my child's discomfort immediately so they don't cry.
Mhm.
Versus, this is
Yeah.
a different parental model where it's like, okay, this is a necessary struggle that me as a parent, I'm here to support, right? And I'll give them a finality to it. I usually tell them that this phase ends at about 12 weeks. I think is a way of just kind of setting their goal, an understanding of this takes some time
Yeah.
and it's okay if it takes that long, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make a point here that nearly every visit, when we are being asked about this gassy, grunty period, we are also being asked about constipation. And that's why it's important to remember that these discussions that we have with patients are happening in the context of the well child visit, right? We as the physicians are actually examining the infant. We're asking questions about the stooling. I often am telling parents that there's a lot of variability in what is normal frequency for stooling at this age.
Yeah.
And it's not, I try to reassure parents, it's not necessarily about the frequency that they're stooling. It's about the consistency of the stool. It's about how they're growing. It's about any signs of difficulty with absorbing with mucus or blood in the stool.
Often I will use to differentiate between constipation, stool caliber. So even if they've skipped 2 days and they
Yes.
have a very large bowel movement and it's still soft and
Soft. Yes.
oftentimes like a big blowout, that is not constipation if the
Yeah.
stool is still soft, even though it's not frequent, right?
Yes, exactly. This is still that mechanism coming into place, developing continence. Yeah.
So, this is the first step in my pediatric guidance to just kind of set the parental mindset, have them understand maybe what's going on physiologically to be able to support their child through this more difficult time.
Yeah, actually, let's talk now about all of the things that parents can do to support their infant, as well as let's talk about some of those most common products that are marketed to parents as solutions for this. Okay, so everybody, all comers, very safe, often effective to just do simple maneuvers like bicycling the legs that can help with that gut motility.
I also encourage parents, sometimes they need to be picked up, rocked or walked around, a car ride, a stroller ride. Sometimes those
Yeah.
baby seat will have a little vibratory pattern that can sometimes be a little soothing, or have the baby sit in the baby swing for a little bit can also ease some of that discomfort. And
Yeah, which is interesting because it's probably partially distracting them from the sensation, as well as just the change in position, the flexion at the hips is also
yeah.
helping move things through. So,
Yeah. So any of these measures, I give parents free rein to try all of those at any time, right?
yes, yeah, I totally agree. The question that comes up often is if and when do you change the formula or
Yes.
take things out of the breast milk?
Sometimes the formula change winds up being just enough until you reach that quote
Age.
unquote 12-week part, and then it
Yes.
just gets better. And whatever formula they were on at the end is the one that they swear by. So whether or not I'm convinced that a formula change really does anything, I'm not sure, but it's absolutely safe to do. So the first formula that I recommend changing to is Enfamil Gentle Ease
Mhm,
or the
mhm.
Similac Sensitive.
And just to explain this to our listeners, the theory, the principle behind these formulas is that they both contained a decreased lactose content compared to standard milk-based formulas, and also contained some combination of partially broken down proteins, partially hydrolyzed proteins, or a slightly different carbohydrate blend that will ease digestion. We reference Infamil and Similac because that's usually what we have available in hospitals and offices as samples. There are other brands that make very similar lines of formula, and I would highly recommend just having a discussion with your pediatrician about those other brands if that's what you're considering.
Sometimes they'll say, oh, it was they're just going a little bit too much now, but it's better.
Yeah, yeah. This is an important one to talk about because, again, nothing necessarily needs to be done. And I do caution parents with any formula change, we do expect some change in the infant's digestion that may contribute to fussiness for a few days. Like if you're going to
Right.
change the formula, you've got to stick it out past the transition point to see if it
Right.
works. And it's really funny because just like you, sometimes changing the formula is just buying us time. And time was going to be curative anyway on its own,
Right.
right?
I discourage going to more elemental formulas at this point. It
Yeah.
is so much more expensive and unnecessary for this issue.
So let's turn to infants that are breastfeeding. We get a lot of questions about, is it something in the breast milk? And before we go there, I just want to say that when I see parents who are at this phase and have that gassy, grunty infant and are breastfeeding, I want to acknowledge they have made it through the hardest part of breastfeeding, right?
Yes.
Those first couple of weeks initiating breastfeeding. And I am so enthusiastic encouraging that mother, continue on in your breastfeeding. This gassy gruntiness happens to all infants, formula fed and breastfed. Making changes often doesn't make any difference. Please continue on. But that being said, we get these questions about, should I take something out of the breast milk?
I get this a lot where the mom will say, "I think it was the Brussels sprouts," or "Is it my
Yes, the
coffee? Is it my
cauliflower.
coffee? Yeah, coffee that's
Yeah.
causing the problem." So I will get that quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly doesn't hurt to try. And it may be in the process of trial and error. We're also just allowing that all important time to pass and the issues may resolve. So I always tell moms if they're motivated and they think they see a pattern, then absolutely go ahead and eliminate certain things from your diet. But again, with the knowledge that it may not make a difference. Okay, Sylvia, I think the next thing we should talk about is the Windi. It's a tube that is marketed as a means of relieving gas. And it's called Windi the Gas Passer. And it's basically a hollow tube that inserts into the rectum, just like you would insert a rectal thermometer. There's a stopper so that you can't insert too far. And then this allows gas to pass through the tube. Honestly, rectal stimulation using a rectal thermometer is a method a lot of parents are aware of, where you put in the rectal thermometer just long enough to take a temperature, and often that stimulation of the rectum is enough to produce a bowel movement. It's unclear to me if I think that the Windi actually has a different mechanism of relieving gas, or if it's more just that that stimulation of the rectum is causing any gas and stool to be pushed out through.
So this is kind of like passing wind. It helps babies release the gas that's in the lower portion of their GI tract, right? In theory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't really know how much this works as a gas releasing device or
Yeah.
whether or not it's just another way of providing that rectal stimulation to help the baby
Right.
release any stool that's in the rectal vault, right?
Yes. Yes. Right.
Usually parents ask me about the Windi, and I do bounce back to my previous advice where if you help them too much and they learn to be reliant on rectal stimulation in order to pass a stool, it counteracts the philosophy of supporting them and letting them figure it out on their own, right?
Yeah. Yes, I agree. It's always with a caution of this should
Right.
be infrequent.
Right, and if you find that you're using it pretty much every time in order to relieve discomfort, pain, or pass a bowel movement, then you need to go back to the pediatrician, right? There's
Yeah,
more that needs to
absolutely.
be done at
Absolutely.
that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. Okay. So next in line, I would say we get asked about gripe water and
Mhm.
Mylicon.
Right. So gripe water and Mylicon are over-the-counter oral remedies that you can give your child like a little dropper full of some liquid, and it's been marketed to help this gassy phase.
Yeah, let's talk about these two. So, gripe water, which incidentally has been around since the mid 1800s, although it used to contain alcohol, it doesn't anymore, thank goodness. It still is an unregulated mix of different herbal supplements like fennel, ginger, dill seed, sodium bicarbonate, things that we know help with gut pain in adults. And it's marketed under many different brands. Mommy's Bliss, Little Remedies, CVS has a proprietary brand. This is marketed for colic. I usually am only talking about it in the context of colic. For that normal gassy, grunty infant, I would not recommend it. And even in the context of colic, there are cautions that I'm going to give parents concerning gripe water. But in the setting that we're talking about today, I really would, again, the baby just needs time to work this out. I would recommend avoiding gripe water. The other one that is talked about is Mylicon. That's the brand name. The name of the ingredient is simethicone. So sometimes the generic is simethicone drops. This is FDA regulated. Simethicone is a non-absorbable surfactant silicone compound. What that means is that it's not absorbed through the gut. It's not absorbed into the bloodstream. It stays in the gut. It forms a layer around air bubbles that causes them to break up and then kind of permeate more diffusely through the colon, with the idea that it's going to avoid there being any of those larger air bubbles that could cause pain. Again, I'm usually talking about Mylicon in the setting of colic. Colic is crying that occurs for 3 hours or longer, multiple times a week, if not every day. That's not what we're talking about here. So I usually don't recommend it in this context. It is safe to try it with the caveat that it may not make any difference. And then again, I want parents to be careful with how often they're dosing it. It should not be every feeding. Use it only when you need it. So occasionally now we'll hear about probiotics.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about your thoughts on that?
Sure. At 1 month, we usually only recommend that the baby take breast milk or formula and any prescribed medication. So at this phase, we don't really recommend probiotics.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to everything we've said. We just want to be so careful about introducing anything unnecessary to that infant gut at this time.
Probiotics, I believe, has a place in medicine.
Hmm.
There are times where I do recommend probiotics, but the 1 month grunting is not a time where I recommend probiotics.
Yeah, I fully agree.
We've had a great discussion about this infantile period of gas and grunting and change in stool patterns.
Okay, wait, Sylvia. So before we go to our concluding thoughts, I think we all need to know. So, what did you do? You remember with your 4 children going through this phase, we've talked about all these over the counter things that are available. What did you do with your kids?
I actually didn't use anything. I just held my kid. If they needed to be comforted, I just picked them up. If we were going to have a bad night, we just had a bad night. Just kind of knowing that, all right, this is what I'm here for.
Yeah, I totally felt the same. I mean, I just didn't even really consider any of these things until I had my baby with colic. And we will do that in a different episode because that is a different level of desperation.
Yes, absolutely.
But not in this context. That baby that is just like grunty, groany, going through this phase, I just didn't do anything with them
Right.
other than, holding them and the things we
Right.
talked about.
So, our summary statements from today's discussion, this gassy period that infants often have, starting at maybe 2 weeks or 4 weeks of age, it's a finite period of time in the baby's development. It ends at about 12 weeks, and the main goal of the parents is to support their children through this phase, not to try to eliminate all symptoms altogether. We reviewed different formulas and how they may play a role during this phase. We outlined and reviewed the over-the-counter remedies that are marketed for this period of time, of which our general thought is it is not necessary at all. It's something that should be used very infrequently, if at all. But in general, our overarching thoughts are to be the supportive parent at this time and to allow your baby's gut to develop like it should without any external assistance. In time, this phase will end.
As we look ahead to future topics off of this, certainly colic. We are going to talk about colic. And then formula. There's so many formulas on the market right now. There's the European formulas that have become more popular in America as well. So I look forward to that discussion too. And constipation, we do need to start tackling constipation.
What is constipation? This is not what we talked about today, but what does it look like? How do we treat it? And what is to be done about constipation. So there are a lot of topics that we can discuss that just kind of got tipped on today's episode. This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Sylvia.
And I'm Vivian. As always, thank you for listening. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.